Driving the race car is the easiest part of the whole job. It's all the other bits and pieces you got to figure out, which is really what makes the big difference at the end of the day is, because everybody is really talented when you get to a certain level. So then it's all the other stuff you got to figure out, to get that the most out of your car, the team, all the people around you, and work everything to your advantage. It's like running a business, when you're in F1 team in particular. I never forget the first lap I went out, on the rookie orientation. You go out of pit lane, you go slow, you sort of and then down to turn 3 and then 4, and you come out of 4, and everybody's been telling you that's the thing, you gotta be flat in turn 1, otherwise you'll be nowhere. I'm like, I see turn 1 as a sort of head of a needle at the end of the straight, and I was like, there's no way in this lifetime I'm gonna go flat through that corner. Much like when you drive. I mean, when I paint, although it takes me way longer to get dialed in to that state of mind you have when you race, but it's very similar in the end. Your total focus, you kind of forget about time, space, anything. You just 100% dialed into what you do, and that's what I've been getting through the painting, and then of course through all that, then when you create, then your mind is always occupied, and you get ideas, you get impressions from all kinds of different, what you see, what you hear, and often for me, of what I read. Hi everybody, this is Stefan Johansson, and we're at Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
It's an absolute pleasure. He probably barely remembers the Detroit Grand Prix in the early 80s. I remember the Detroit Grand Prix because I was on the streets there watching him zip around. What an honor to have you on the program. Welcome into Cars and Culture, Stefan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Do you remember those early Detroit racing days?
Of course, absolutely, yeah.
Formula One is so popular now in America, but at that point, there weren't many Americans at the race.
No, I mean, it's extraordinary, the dynamic now and how it's come about, really, because they've been trying since the 50s, really, to break into the American market, and finally they did it with ironically through a TV show, really, is what's made all the difference, isn't it?
Right. Could you have ever imagined the day that Formula One drivers on the streets of an American city would be overrun because of their popularity of a TV show?
No, never. But I guess that's the world we live in today, right?
I guess it is. Yeah.
Completely different, yeah.
What are your memories of your early Formula One days, and specifically the days in North America?
Yeah, I think all of us used to love coming to America to race. America has always been, for Europeans, especially in those days, was like the dream, really. The American dream, really. That's what it was. Especially California, of course, because of the weather and the scenery here and everything else. But yeah, we used to love coming to race here. We didn't have that many races back then, of course, but there was always one on the calendar pretty much every year. So
right. Yeah. It's it definitely has a different appeal now. And when you think about Las Vegas, Miami, Austin, perhaps other cities, the sport is reaching a new pinnacle to some extent, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is the biggest it's ever been, without a doubt. I mean, we can see that in terms of, how many venues, the level of interest, the TV figures, everything is through the roof compared to what it used to be. So I have to take my hat off to Liberty. I think they've done a terrific job with the whole with the series. The competition is great, really. I think a lot of people, including myself, had doubts about the rules and doubts about the cost cap and all these other things. But I have to say it does work, and we've certainly never had a closer grid from first to last than we have now in Formula One since I certainly can't remember, and I don't think there ever has been.
Yeah. How did you get started in racing, and what was the motivation? How does a guy from Sweden start out racing?
Well, I grew up with it. My dad was racing, sort of club racing back home in Sweden. So I used to go to races with him when I was 3, 4 years old. So it became natural to me, and you live in that world, and then you sort of it just kind of grows automatically almost. But being a Swede, I was also very heavily involved in ice hockey. I played on a reasonably high level in ice hockey, and I had to sort of make a decision when I was 18. Was it going to be hockey or racing? And then I chose racing and packed my two little bags and set off for England, trying to make a career out of it.
Was it a fork in the road? I mean, were you a good ice hockey player?
I was decent, but I don't think I was ever good enough. I mean, look, I think you can be good enough at anything you do if you really, really want it. But I certainly wanted to be a racing driver more than I wanted to be a hockey player.
Mm.
So it wasn't a particularly difficult decision.
Swedes are great on the ice. I mean, I think of Henrik Zetterberg and Nicholas Lidstrom and all kinds of others who have been
So,
hockey players.
yeah.
Were you a Ronnie Peterson fan growing up?
Yeah. Oh, but he was really well, I guess Jim Clark was my first hero. The first driver I can remember being really, he was the man at the time when I was like, I don't know, 6, 7 years old. But Ronnie was for sure the big hero. I mean, he was in all of Sweden because he was really the first proper F1 driver we had, and on top of that, he was also extremely good. So, that yeah, I mean, the whole country just came to a halt when the few times we actually got to see the races because the races weren't live on TV every time back
Right,
then. Yeah.
right. But your parents, I mean, you mentioned your dad was a club racer. How heavily involved was he, and what was their thought about you deciding that you were going to go that direction instead of the puck and the stick?
Well, I think it was more him who decided that was the way to go than me, frankly.
Sure, sure.
No, I had massive support from my dad. But we didn't have a lot of money in our family, so it wasn't like, I mean, we really sort of hustled to try to make everything work, but we got enough together with friends, family, some sponsors here and there and so on to make the move to England. But I didn't really tell my parents, but I mean, I had no money to live even, so I lived in my car for the most part for 2 years, the first two
Really
years I was there.
lived in
And
your car.
scrounging a bit here and there, and whatever the test drive came up, you try to just make the most of it, and little by little, sort of one thing led to another, and then eventually I had teams keeping an eye on me and gave me the rides or the breaks that was needed to sort of get to the next level.
Your route was through the British Formula 3 Championship, right? Which you won
Yeah,
in 1980,
yeah,
driving for a future McLaren team boss, Ron Dennis,
yeah,
and
exactly.
his Project 4 team.
Yeah, it was yeah. So I drove the year before. I was driving for an Irish team owner, Derek McMahon, and Ron was just putting his whole sort of Marlboro package together then, and I was just starting to get some support from them. So they were like the Red Bull of today, I guess. The program they had, they really started that program with supporting a lot of young drivers a little bit, but not fully, but enough to sort of keep you going. So Ron came and offered me the drive in his F3 team, and we managed to win the championship. And of course, then he went off and bought McLaren at the end of that year, and the rest is history, really, as far as his legacy goes.
That was 1980, and a few years
Yeah,
later, you make it to Formula One after spending 1982 in the European Formula Two Championship.
yeah,
You were with
right.
Spirit Racing at that point, right?
Yeah. So I did 2 years in F2. I did it with Alan Docking Racing in 81, and then with Spirit Honda more, that was Honda's comeback into racing in F2 in 82. And then that led to the F1 drive with Honda in 83, of course.
Right, right. And then you were on your way.
Yeah.
And and how would you describe your Formula One experience?
I mean, it was, I mean, fantastic. Of course, it was a
Fantastic.
dream. It's the dream that every young boy dreams of. And I finally got my break after a massive amount of setbacks in the junior categories, almost there, then not, and you always find a way. But then, of course, the program just stopped at the end of the year, so there I was again without anything. So I ended up going to Japan for a couple of years. Well, 1 year really, 84. And then I sort of became the super sub in F1. I replaced Martin Brundle when he broke his leg in the Tyrrell. Did 4 races with Ken Tyrrell, and then that led to the Tolman drive where I was teammates with Ayrton the last 4 races of the year, and in 84 also with the Tolman,
Wow, what
which
was
then
that
led
like?
to the Ferrari drive, weirdly. So there you
Right.
go.
What
Weird.
what was it like to be a teammate of future triple world driver champion and legend Ayrton Senna?
It was interesting. I mean, you could tell already then, that I mean, he had that personality, that was absolutely no compromise. Had he been a banker, he would have been ahead of JP Morgan today. It was just that attitude to everything he did, and on top of that, of course, he was an unbelievably talented driver. I mean, really, I wouldn't say he's the best in history because I think he had other flaws, but as far as raw speed goes, I don't think there's ever or maybe ever will be another driver like Ayrton. I mean, he was quite special, really, in that regard.
Precision is what the word is with Ayrton, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's the whole package, really. I mean, it's not just for a racing driver. I always say this to the guys I manage when I start managing them that driving the race car is the easiest part of the whole job. It's all the other bits and pieces you got to figure out, which is really what makes the big difference at the end of the day. Is because everybody is really talented when you get to a certain level. So then it's all the other stuff you got to figure out, to get that the most out of your car, the team, all the people around you, and work everything to your advantage. It's like running a business, when
Yeah.
you're in an F1 team in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your, we talked a little bit about kind of off the track and the excitement and the popularity. What do you think of today's current climate of F1? The drivers,
You mean in terms of skill level, or?
yeah, the talent that exists in the field. And when you go from Verstappen to Hamilton to Leclerc to Sainz and on and on.
I think pretty much the whole grid today, maybe with the exception of one, is extremely good. Maybe the best it's ever been, at this level today, because when you look at, I mean, all of them are really, really good. And what the only thing really that kind of makes the difference at the end of the day, and it's always been the same, of course, is the racecraft. It's one thing to be quick. It's another thing to actually finish a race and score the maximum points you can on the day with the equipment you have given to you. And there's never more than a handful that's can handle that. And it doesn't matter what series you're in. It's pretty much consistent throughout. It's always the cream always rises to the top. You have a bunch of super fast drivers, but for some reason they just can't piece it all together to the checkered flag. It's always something that happens. It's not necessarily always their fault, but it's what I'm talking about, like I said before, the bigger picture, because there's so many other things than just driving a race car that makes the result on Sunday afternoon. And that's where the difference is really. But driving standard level is super high at the moment because they started when they were 4 or 5 years old, all of them now in karting. Back when I started, you had to be 12 before you could start racing go-karts. So they already have a 6 year head start in that regard. And karting is incredible good training. It's probably the best training you can have, even currently. I mean, Schumacher used to spend every day in a go-kart when he wasn't testing or racing his F1 car, because it's almost the closest thing you can get to the reaction speed and everything of an F1 car. And of course, then they have simulators, which now are so realistic that it's almost identical to the real thing. So there's a lot of different tools that just wasn't available back in the day, which obviously makes a huge difference.
You're kicking off our Indy 500 month of coverage, and we're going to have current drivers and former drivers and all kinds of people that are associated with the sport. You drove your first Indy 500 in 1993. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think of that compared to what you had gone through in the previous decade?
Well, I mean, a completely new experience. It was quite wildly different in every aspect of it, really, and I never forget the first lap I went out, on the rookie orientation. You go out of pit lane, you go slow, and then down to turn three and then four, and you come out of four, and everybody's been telling you that's the thing, you got to be flat in turn one, otherwise you'll be nowhere. I'm like, I see turn one as a sort of head of a needle at the end of the straight, and I was like, there's no way in this lifetime I'm going to go flat through that corner. you know? But you build up to it little by little, you sort of, and then of course, then once you go flat, then you got to trim the car out to actually go fast as well, so then that's a whole other level. But Indy is, in my opinion, and I think every driver that's ever done it's by far the best experience for a racing driver.
Really?
It's mighty. I mean, it really is. It takes everything out of you. They call it the year of May for a reason, because you're
Mm.
absolutely worn out mentally when it's over. It's just screws with your head every day. You think you got a great car, everything's comfortable, you got it all dialed in. Then the wind changes five
The wind
degrees. You
blows.
have a
Right.
big moment, and now you don't know what happened there, so now you don't have the confidence, then you feather just a little bit, and that changes completely the weight distribution of the car and the aero and everything. So it's just a mind game the whole time, the track versus you, basically. And then, of course, in the race, it's a whole different story again, because now you're in traffic, and yeah, so it's an incredibly cool race.
Yeah, we interviewed Connor Daly recently,
Mm.
and Connor talked about the butterflies that exist and the excitement that exists
Yeah.
and the
Right.
buildup and everything else, and then sitting there strapped in and ready to go.
Yeah. Indy qualifying is the ultimate for a racing driver, as far as I'm concerned, because that's you just got to go out and lay it on the line. And, sometimes you don't know if it's going to stick or not, so it's really, really takes everything out of you.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've participated in all kinds of different racing, sports cars, Indy cars. We talked about F1. Where were you most comfortable?
Uh, I think in sports cars, probably. Um, I enjoy the format of sports cars too, with two drivers or three drivers share the car. It's a lot of variety, it's a lot of improvisation. It's phenomenal racing because you race hard, although it's a 24-hour race like Le Mans, for example. You're on the limit the whole time now. The cars are so good that you can drive them on the limit all the time. You couldn't do that in the early Le Mans. I did in 83 and 84, because then you just wear out the gearbox, the brakes and everything, but the new cars, they're so strong now, so it's like, but the thing is, with all the traffic and there's dirt on the track, I don't think I've done it 18 times now, I think, and I don't think I've ever had the same line through one of the corners twice, because it's always
Wow.
either it's traffic or there's debris on the track or it's something else. I mean, it's like it's really you pretty much improvise every single lap and every corner, and you just got to extract the most out of the grip you have, at whatever given time. So it's a really, really challenging race and incredibly exciting, and I mean, it's a grind, to do the 24 hours, of course, but it's incredibly satisfying when you've done it, whether you win or not. It still feels like a big achievement.
Well, and in fact, you did win, and
Yeah, yeah,
you've won at Sebring too.
yeah. It's a couple of times at Sebring. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, incredibly satisfying, right? Well, your first win at Le Mans was at 97. Was that
yeah.
with
Hmm.
Yost?
With Yost, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You still remember that moment, the finish line, the checkered
Oh,
flag,
of
everything else?
course, yeah,
Of course you
absolutely,
do.
yeah. I mean, weirdly, but frankly, you almost remember every race in
Oh,
quite vivid detail. But I mean, of course, Le Mans, and winning it was, I mean, it's definitely one of the highlights of my career, of course, and then more so doing it with, well, Tom was the sort of new kid on the block. Well, I was too, actually, because I hadn't driven the car or been to Le Mans for over 10 years at that point, but Tom was his first race. But Michele, of course, we'd sort of followed each other our whole career at that point. We raced hard against each other in F3 and F2. Then he ended up in F1. Then I came into F1. Then we became teammates at Ferrari, and then we raced against each other a few more years. Then we ended up being teammates at Arrows for a while. And then we did the first race Ferrari ever did with the 333 SP at Daytona. It was me and Michele and Maribaldi shared the car there. And then we ended up winning Le Mans in the Porsche. And then we ended up being teammates at Audi. So we were like, I mean, I loved Michele, from anyway, always, but he sort of became like a brother in the end almost.
Wow.
Yeah.
Schumacher, how well did you know him?
Pretty well, actually. Just actually funny story on that one. The first time Michael ever drove an F1 car, it was actually my car he drove.
Really?
But no one.
Really?
Yeah, it's a very, very strange story. So
tell me.
We were testing at Hockenheim when I was driving for Onyx in '89. And Michael no one even heard of him at that point. He was racing sort of, just started doing Formula 3, but I knew that his team owner, Willie Weber, who then became his manager, of course, I knew Willie quite well from the F1 days. We had mutual friends and we used to go to dinner and stuff at the German races. And Willie showed up for the test with this young kid, and I can't remember the exact circumstances, but I had to leave early for some reason to go to the airport. And it was like 2 or 3 hours to go. And I was told Alan Jenkins, who was the technical director of the, head engineer, and you wouldn't mind putting this kid in the car and let him do a few laps, it might, So he got in the car, drove with my helmet and my overalls, and did about 10 laps around Hockenheim.
And how did he do in your car?
I don't think he was just really trying to, enjoy the experience. I think it wasn't by any means out there trying to prove himself. And obviously we couldn't really tell anyone either because he was, he was in my suit and helmet, so no one's supposed to know,
Right, exactly.
Him and Willie. Yeah.
His first seat time is thanks to you. Wow, that's an untold story.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah.
Fascinating. McLaren, the work that you're doing with McLaren, how did that come about, and what are you doing as a brand?
You mean now, currently, or?
Correct.
Yeah, well, I do the odd, events with them now with the road cars. Sometimes race with the F1 team too, but primarily with the road car. With some of their clients, we've done some sort of collab with the art that I do now. I've done some artwork for them. That we, yeah. So it's been a nice. Well, it's always been a great relationship with McLaren anyway over the years, But
sure.
But this is, yeah, they're very good people, enjoyable people to work with, as well as, the work they do is terrific, So it's been fun.
I want to get into the art because it's almost the back half of this show in my mind anyway. But before we do, I want to ask you about being a team owner. How did that compare to being a driver? And I mean, did you enjoy the pursuit of sponsorships as much as the pursuit of a checker flag?
No, I mean, being a team owner is really fun if you have the budget and you can plan and do everything properly, and hire the right people and just build a winning team. But the backside of that is the endless hunt for the money, to have a budget to just to do the job the right way. And but it was a very interesting experience. I enjoyed it a lot actually. But when I decided to move to California at a certain point, then I just shut everything down because it was that, right after the split between IndyCar and So it
Mm.
just got more and more difficult, to raise the money and everything. But yeah, it was interesting. It's like, when you're a driver, and you ding the front wing, you come in with half the front wing hanging off the car, you just come on, guys, hurry up, stick another wing on. We still have 5 minutes left in the second. So when you're an owner, you see the car coming limping down the road, like, oh crap, there's another 50 grand gone down the drain. So you get a different perspective of it, when you're on the other side of the fence, of course.
Your artwork came about to some extent because of tragedy or the
Yeah.
result of tragedy. And let's talk about Elio De Angelis and 1986 and you with a canvas. How did that all come to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very strange circumstances, really. How it's weird how life just sort of takes its own turn sometimes. But so Ellie and I developed a really, really strong friendship, really in a fairly short period of time, actually. So started in 84, really, when I had a few days with it, but mainly 85 and 86. So for whatever reason, we seemed to find each other on the racetrack every single race, duking it out, just sort of really hard racing, but always fair, good racing. And you get out of the car, you give each other a hug, and oh, that was great, awesome, blah, blah, blah. So through that, this sort of really strong bond was created, and we had a massive respect for each other, but we also, you know, had kind of similar outlook on life, I think, and we used to hang out a lot between races and even at races, go to dinners and stuff. And we became really close friends in a very short period of time, and of course, when he had his accident, that was, we sat in the pit lane like literally 5 minutes before, just talking about the previous race and this and that, and then he goes out and I get in the car a minute or two later on and go out and I see this big cloud of smoke, at the end of the pit straight and get down there and I see this car upside down on fire, and I stopped. Prost was there too, I think, and I think either Alan Jones or Jack Lafitte. Anyway, we're trying to get him out of the car, and it was obviously a, unbelievably traumatic experience, to go through all that. And when I get home, the next few days, it was really affected me badly, for whatever reason. I went and bought some canvas and some paint and wanted to do something in his memory, and then sort of like a bolt of lightning hit me, I realized that this is something I really love doing, so then that's pretty much how it started. And I've been painting not every day, but pretty much all the time since then, actually.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I mean, incredible evolution of who you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's been a good thing for me. I mean, I think everybody have their own way of, sort of, I mean, we call it therapy or whatever, to just kind of unwind from the daily whatever issues everybody has during the day, and for me, it was a way to kind of detune from the racing, I think, and sort of take that pressure and stress out of the way for a few days of those moments. Because much like when you drive, I mean, when I paint, although it takes me way longer to get dialed in to that state of mind you have when you race, but it's very similar in the end. Your total focus, you kind of forget about time, space, anything. You just 100% dialed into what you do, and that's what I've been getting through the painting, and then of course through all that, then when you create, then your mind is always occupied and you get ideas, you get impressions from all kinds of different, what you see, what you hear, and often for me, of what I read. And then that I have a notebook that's hundreds of pages with notes and ideas, and then that final thing that needs to be that for it to, okay, now this is it. So then you have something. We sort of add all these bits and pieces together, and that's now the idea for a new painting, So that's kind of how it'll sort of come about, really.
You do so many interesting things. You do fine art. You do sort of abstract to some extent.
Yeah.
You have some photo collections, things like you do skateboards,
Yeah.
boards. Did you know that you had it in you, Stefan?
Not before I started, no, because I never took any lessons or anything. I just sort of been winging it all like most my whole life. It's been winging it. Somehow I've made it work out so far, you know. I mean, trust me to pick the two probably most difficult things you can do in life to try to make a
Right.
living out of.
Right.
Like F1 driver and an artist, you know, but I love it. That's probably the most important at the end of the day. And I think if you do something you love, you know, if you get reasonably good at it, you can always find a way to make a living out of it too.
Does the artistry on canvas translate to artistry on track?
Well, it does in a weird way. Yeah. I mean, as I said, you know, like when you get into that kind of flow state, I call it, you know,
Oh,
when
yeah.
yeah, of the zone, yeah. It's very similar, really, you know, in that you're so into what you do that you literally, I mean, I'm often here in the studio, you know, I start painting, I don't know, 7, 8 in the evening sometime, and before I know it, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And you just have no idea where the time went, you know, it just and it's a you know, it's a pretty special space to be in, you know, mentally as well when you get to that stage.
And I'm guessing the similarities of the mindset when it comes to each endeavor are exactly that is finding that what's within you to be able to drive 200 miles an hour or to be able to paint for 6 hours.
Yeah, I think it's part of that. I think one thing, you know, racing is it's a pretty good training for anything you do in life, really, you know, because there's so many different aspects to it, you know, and it's but most for me at least, I mean everybody's different, but for me, I think it's always been in that environment where it requires a huge amount of discipline. And everybody in the business is incredibly disciplined and organized and, you know, motivated and really, you know, and being in that F1 environment in particular, well, I mean, IndyCar is the same, really, you know, where there's everything is just so well done through the whole process. And it doesn't matter what job description you have, you know, it's everybody is sort of programmed to be the best they can, you know, otherwise you won't last, basically.
Right.
And I try to apply that same sort of mindset to my and try to be very disciplined, you know, and just have that total focus on you know, getting the job done, basically.
Mental preparation, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
getting yourself into the mental state. Yeah. Who do you admire in the art side?
Well, as a pure artist of sort of living, the one, I mean, not many people know this guy, but for me, he's one of the best. His name is Mark Tansey.
Okay.
He's a figurative American artist. Um, I really admire his work. I still haven't figured out how he does it, but I've tried hard but his paintings are really cool.
Well,
Both sort of subject matter and technique, the technique he's using. But apart from that, you know, the art today is it's not really about the art anymore, is it? I mean, it's just because, you know, anything literally can be a work of art today. You know, you take a can of Coca-Cola and sign it, you know, it's a work of art and so millions of dollars, you know. And so I think it's more for an artist, it's more about how you market yourself, how you know, and so I'm absolutely fascinated with guys like Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst, for example, who clearly have figured out that side of the business, you know, and it making me realize more and more that it's a business more than anything else, and you got to approach it as a business. If you want to be successful as an art, of course, you can paint all your life, but you're not going to be successful unless you treat it as a business.
well, you have some interesting sections of your website, stefanjohansson.art. Friends, heroes, and wankers.
Yeah.
What is this all about?
Well, you know, I think it's pretty obvious who's who if you look through the collection of
Oh, I
portraits.
noticed.
So this is the series of portraits I've been doing for quite some time now, and it's, you know, art is subjective, of course. It's all in the eye of the beholder. But I think if you look at the different pieces, it's easy to figure out who's who, you know. But what I base all those paintings on, the part is because if you see the pictures, you see the text that's applied to all the different paintings. And it's really more about the text, the quotes, than it is the subject. So I choose the paint or the subject to paint based on the quote, because I read a lot, you know, and every now and then something jumps out at you, you know, and think that would be a good, because I'm basically trying to get a reaction from the viewer one way or the other, you know, laugh, angry, thoughtful, whatever, you know. And I think these paintings, anyway, the hope anyway, or the objective is to trigger some kind of a reaction from the viewer, whether it's positive, negative, or whatever, you know. So, and a few of the subjects are racing people, of course, like Enzo Ferrari,
Hmm.
and Fangio had a great quote. Sterling Moss quote I love. If you see that one on the website, yeah, that quote of his just sums up for me exactly the mind of a racing driver.
Hmm.
And Sterling was an incredible, cool guy. You know, I mean, he was like the racing driver. You know, he was an amazing guy.
Yeah, the Sterling Moss quote is for those who want to see it, just go to the website. I don't want to spoil it, but Juan Fangio is there, and
Uh,
all kinds of interesting individuals who most would know from the title of Friends, Heroes, and Wankers. Watches too. You like watches, don't you? How did how,
yeah.
how did that come to be?
Again, you know, I mean, it was actually while I was still in F1, this Swiss company came to me and asked me to be like an ambassador for them, whatever. But the brand, the watches they had wasn't particularly great design, or you know, so we sort of agreed we maybe would do, you know, collaboration and to see if we can come up with some design, you know, and do some contribution to the design. So that's really how it started. They then wanted to do very low end and sort of high volume, and I was more interested in, or became during that process, much more interested in the mechanical movements and um, more more complicated movements. So then I decided to sort of go out and do it. I learned enough in that process about how the business works. So I went off and sort of sourced my own suppliers and decided to do my own thing instead
Hmm.
with my own design. So the design is 100% mine. And then obviously I saw it's a bit like building a race car, really. You know, you have the movement, you have the case manufacturer, you have the dials, the hands, the strap, and then you have one house that just assemble everything and do the testing and everything else.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful watches.
Thank you.
In the few minutes that we have remaining, let's go back to racing for a little bit. You have raced with some of the greatest names: Porsche, McLaren, Ferrari, and some others, Tolman, Shadow. What was the best car that you raced?
Well, it raced or drove?
Well, yes.
Because the reason I'm asking that question is because the best F1 car I drove, I never got to race, unfortunately. It was the Tolman, 1985 Tolman.
Okay.
Car was so good. And then, you know, after we did the testing in Rio, the preseason testing, super fast. We were quickest of everybody. And then, you know, Tolman couldn't get tires. There was some political issue with Pirelli or whatever it was. And so they didn't do the first race of the year because they just had no tire supply. So I did a stand in at Tyrrell because Ken and Stefan Bellof had a fallout of whatever it was on literally 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday. So Ken walks up to me and says, "Do you have your overalls with?" I said, "Sure." Get in the car.
Get in the car.
Yeah. So anyway, I got back from that race, and then I got the call from Ferrari, of course, you know, shortly after that. So then I never actually got into Tolman to race it, but that car was designed by Rory Byrne, of course, who ended up being the chief designer for Ferrari when Schumacher, through that whole Schumacher period,
Mhm.
and the Benetton before that. I mean, Rory's with Newey and I think one of the top three designers in F1 history. I mean, the car was just so good to drive. So anyway, so that was the F1, and then so that car, and then in sports car racing is also kind of an unknown car, the Cytec, which ran for many, many years, but it was never ever run by like a proper, well-funded team. But it was still winning races everywhere. But again, it's a phenomenal car, but just never really got the credit or the glory it should have had, if it had been top teams running the car.
What was the car you never wanted to climb into the cockpit again?
Well, the 88 Ligier would definitely be up there. There's been a few sports cars that Le Mans as well. That was like you literally just lost your will to live after 3 laps, and just put me out of my misery.
Yeah. Were there times in your career when you wanted to let's just say flat give up and instead decided to stick it out?
When I came over here to do IndyCar, this sort of thought had entered my mind, should I just, because I was just burned down on F1 at that point, because that's the thing with F1. I mean, you get burned out way, way faster than you do in IndyCar, for example. Just the pressure, and all the stuff you have to do, media commitments, everything else, it gets tiring after a while. So it's like a breath of fresh air to come over here. But I had been over a couple of times, looking at some races, and I really liked the vibe in the paddock. It's very relaxed. Everybody's, it's just a different kind of atmosphere, and I kind of fancied that, I fancied one, sort of thought I would enjoy that, and have a go. And of course, when I came over, I loved it. It was like really a breath of fresh air to come over and race here.
I thought maybe you might actually talk about Jeff Krosnoff and the incident that you were involved in that ended up taking his life. I can only imagine how difficult that is to move on from too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, no question about it. I mean, it was again, an incredibly hard period, and for many, many, many years, it was still affecting me, and even to this day, sometimes you get flashbacks, and it was and again, weirdly, we were sitting on the same pace car for the parade before the race because we knew each other quite well from Japan, and we just shooting the shit on the thing before the race started, and then this thing happens. It's just horrible.
Yeah. In racing, Stefan, particularly endurance racing, the adage is success is in the recovery. There are always obstacles that will come your way, but how you respond can determine whether you win or lose. Does that carry over in life as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it's absolutely, I mean, I'm sure every single person on the planet goes through, it's just life, isn't it? It's no such thing as every day being just, happy and or great, I mean, it's just, there's always issues of one way or another, isn't it? And I guess that's the tricky bit, isn't it? How you overcome them and how you recover from it and how you move on, from these things.
Yeah, right.
I think again, racing in that regard is actually, I mean, at least for me, it's been an incredibly helpful process because that's what you do every day. You put out, whether you're a driver or a team owner, you put out 10 fires every day, or whatever nature it may be. So you become incredibly good at solving problems very quickly and very rationally, I would say. So that's just part of your life, and you do it every day of your life for the best part of 40 years. You become reasonably good at sort of figuring these things out.
Yeah. Well, what an absolute treat to spend time with you here on the program, kicking off our Indy month, if you will, and also talking about Formula One racing and talking about art, most importantly. And I think anybody who is interested in your artwork can go to your website. They can find it there. The folks at McLaren have talked glowingly about some of the work that you've done for them and
right.
I appreciate the artwork that you've given to the show today. So
great. No, that's my pleasure. And if you want to tell all your whoever is listening, if anyone is interested, type in SJ20, you get a 20% discount. So
ASJ20?
SJ20.
Oh, SJ20. SJ20 for a 20% discount on the artwork of Stefan Johansson, who was going to be the next Nicholas Lidstrom, but went racing instead.
Yeah, far cry from Nicholas Lidstrom.
My favorite Detroit Red Wing.
Yeah, me too, actually. I just love him. He used to come and hang out at the races in Detroit.
Yes.
He was always there watching.
A fine human being, too.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah. Stefan, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All the best.